All right. Hi, everybody.
I'm sorry that we're late. We thought we were live a little while ago, and apparently we weren't because we couldn't find us. Now Stephen is going to try and look for us to make sure that it's live, and that you can see us, and we're not talking to ourselves again.
I just did a whole thing, and well,
He
here,
did. It was so
here we
great.
can see that people
Oh,
are
look
live.
at somebody's watching.
There
I'm
we
so
go.
sorry we're late. All right, thank you so much. So this is we are the authors of the Freedom Model for Addictions. I'm Michelle Dunbar, Stephen Slate, Mark Sharon, and you can send us questions and we will answer them live for you. We do have a couple questions we're going to answer now, again, because we already did that once. And also, though, if at any point you need to talk to somebody, you can dial 888-424-2626 and you'll get Carla. And so if you have questions about our services, if you want one of us to contact you privately, we're happy to do that. You can also find out information about us at thefreedommodel.org and soberforever.net and on social media. So welcome, everyone. I'm so glad that we figured this out. So the very first question we got was from our friend Matthew. And it's a really good question. And he said, I've both noticed and personally experienced a feeling of loss or sadness once AA and the disease model have been revealed to be untrue. A lot of people seem to be sad about letting AA go, as it might have once provided them with feelings of community and a familiar comfort. That was my experience, actually. I've gotten the question, well, what do I do now that so much of my life and identity was tied up in AA and the recovery scene? Do you have any advice for anyone struggling with this? Can you?
Yeah. I just
Mark went through a whole spiel a little while ago.
Yeah, I just explained this to a blank screen, apparently. So in my case, I was indoctrinated into the AA cult from a very young age. And then eventually, I decided that I was going to be a researcher about human behavior, and this whole thing happened. And then I extricated myself out of that model. And
so is that what everybody else should do?
The answer is no. The point is, I had this path that was circuitous and difficult, and in some cases totally unnecessary. What most people can do is they can read the Freedom Model and go from A to Z almost instantly and really understand all the mythology that AA provides and how it's damaging your life, and then you can move on from it. It's easy to let go of something that really, when you see it, has no value, no intrinsic value, when it's not the truth, right? So that's, I think, the first step in getting away from AA. Then what Matthew is talking about is somebody that has made that decision, is willing to let go, has become free from the cult, has moved on from 12-step, from disease nomenclature, all this stuff. And then they're kind of sitting there going,
what do I do?
Yeah, what do I do? And being free has risk. It has, it can be lonely at first, right?
That's definitely true.
Because you had this entire meeting structure that was your social life. That was the fabric of your social paradigm, really, your own personal paradigm. So you're letting go of all that. I think that people don't know that it's okay to just let the past be the past. Mm-hmm. Now, I deal with this with guests all the time. They say, I need to be in therapy on my trauma. I need all this structure around my problems. And I get that. It's important, I think, sometimes to go to therapy. I think it's important for some people to go through that process. But really, you can move on from your past. Yeah. There are whole cultures in the world where there is nothing called therapy. And people have all kinds of struggles and challenges in life, and they move on from them. Mm-hmm. So first, you have to give yourself permission to move on, to be able to let go, draw a line in the sand and say, you know what, maybe I just can move on and let that be the past and start new. And I know that sounds trite and like some movie line or something, but there's real beauty in being free. And in my case, going back to college and trying new things, literally sitting down with a pad of paper and writing down some things that I wanted for myself was huge. Yeah. It was huge because then it directed my life. My mental gaze went from looking at the past and all the failure that I had. And honestly, I didn't have much of anything that was successful in the first 20 years of my life. I had a lot of regret wasted years and pain. And so I gave myself permission to move on. Now, in my case, because I was so steeped in treatment and my path was circuitous and difficult, and I think ours all of ours was, you know, but you can read the book, The Freedom Model, learn what we learned, and then start anew.
Yeah. Well, and I think to a certain extent, for me, AA was, I was in it from a young age with my father, and then as an adult, I went from my whole social life being a drug and alcohol using scene to my whole, like, when you go to AA, you have to give up everything, right? So you give up all your lifelong friends, which a lot of them were friends. I mean, yeah, they were party buddies, but they were friends. But I stopped contact with everybody. It was like that was traumatic in and of itself. And then you kind of get in AA and you realize, after being there for 5-6 years, even though I didn't buy into it all hook, line, and sinker. Leaving it was
unsettling.
It was unsettling. It was scary.
Mm-hmm.
It was, I had a baby, and, so I'm like, I should be home with my new baby and my husband. I should not be running around to AA meetings, and not, like, AA kind of I felt guilty for being at the meetings. I felt guilty for being home. So the transition for me was very, very difficult, to not going to meetings. And then I started doing the research because I was afraid. Even though I didn't believe in the disease concept, I was afraid not to be at meetings.
Yeah.
So I had to learn, I had to deprogram. I had to learn that I was going to be okay.
Yeah, that's key. That is key to somebody truly letting it go.
Yeah.
Because if you're fettered in your mind with, oh my God, if I leave AA, I'm somehow
bad things are going to happen.
I'm going to be triggered back to use. That issue is really dangerous.
Yeah, it is.
So you can't really be free until you get rid of that mythology that's keeping you trapped. But to Matt's point, a lot of people do get there where they're ready to move on, but they just don't know what to do. I think the loneliness issue is the kicker.
Yeah, how am I supposed to meet people?
Yes.
I'm not going to the bar. I'm not going to meetings.
And that may be all like it was for me.
Yeah.
For us three, wouldn't you say that?
Yeah, you were either party friends or you were recovery friends.
Right.
I stayed away from it quite a bit.
Yeah,
I went to the degree that I was obligated to go in a way, but I was never deep like you guys.
Yeah.
But I think you just said, the bar here, and I've said that before because I noticed it. I read this sociologist, these people that break down what happens in a bar and the rules of a bar, that sat there and studied it like a person looking at animals. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
it's funny.
And the thing about the bar is, depending on the type of bar, right? Your typical local or like dive bar.
Right.
If you're sitting there alone at the bar, you are fair game for somebody to sit down next to you and talk to you.
Yeah, that's the purpose of the bar.
That's the purpose of being there.
Right, like that's like the unwritten rules of the place.
Right.
Unless you're off to a table on the side, well, that's a different story. But you're at the bar.
Yeah.
And it's like, and if somebody else is there, you can talk to them. And there's this openness, these rules that don't apply when you're walking down the street. I mean, I live in New York, and you're walking down the street and people try to get your attention all the time. And you're basically like, fuck off.
Yeah.
Just
leave me alone.
But if some stranger approaches you in a bar, you got to at least engage them a little bit, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's what a lot of people like about the bar and drinking situations. And they seem to find the same thing in AA.
Yeah.
People are obligated to talk to you. Now, people have different experiences. Some people face just a ton of openness there, and some of them don't. You know what I mean? But I think as a general rule, like, there's at least this, like, I have to listen to you, even if it's like service work for me to listen to you. Right?
I'm being tortured with the hammer of alcohol over my head if I don't do it.
Right. I have to be nice to people.
And so I definitely get the attraction to be there because, and even when what I went through here, you don't find that kind of openness in a lot of places. But then it begins to wear thin, and you start to see there's all this judgment and competition and stuff. And that's not to say there aren't really nice people there. There are. But that's the attraction to it. And it's like, well, I was involved in the support group we had around here for a little while that quickly ended. Right?
That
And-
experiment.
Yeah. And but then, you know, I remember moving to New York, and I started doing theater, and I had my whole crowd of theater people,
Yeah, you had
that-
developed a new social group.
you know,
Yeah.
around something that I liked doing,
Exactly.
and it ended up being a wonderful experience in my life. And so, like, you know, if you're looking for
That's exactly.
that, you can find it in so many places.
Well, let me jump in there, because that's crucial, because really that's the point of Matthew's question is when you first separate from AA or a 12-step paradigm, time is the biggest resource that you now have,
Right.
which ironically is the most expensive and wonderful resource you have.
Yes.
It's the most expensive because as time goes by, you can't get it back. So it's really super valuable.
Yeah.
And now you have a lot of it. You have a resource that you're not used to having.
Right.
And so you sometimes you'll have a sense of loneliness at that point, which ironically for humans is a tough thing to go through.
Mm-hmm.
So the answer is, what can you do in your sphere of influence to interject yourself into other humans' lives in some way? And I can remember when my son first started wrestling, I was cast into a group of people that I didn't know,
Mm-hmm.
and I had not anticipated, and it ended up being a wonderful era in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And these are friends I'll have for the rest of my life. As an example, that's not something I sought out, it just happened, but I sought it out in my hunting groups. You know, I sought out people that hunted the same way I did. And that's something that I really didn't discover till later, till I consciously thought, what groups of people would
Yeah,
I
what do I
to be-
like? Who
Yeah,
do I
what-
want to talk to?
Yeah, exactly. And that's turned out to be an incredible vocation in my life, a whole
Yeah.
other mission that's developed and is wonderful, really wonderful. So this can happen to anybody. I
Yeah.
also know people who really don't want that.
Yeah.
And that's
And they're happier
And that's
without
okay
it.
too, yeah.
right? I
Good.
mean, it's important to know that you don't have to be involved in meetings. You don't have to be involved in other people's lives either. Some people like,
Yeah,
the
you're
quiet.
you're right to speak to that here, because it's like there's this idea that I need a community to stay sober,
right,
or I need other people that I'm
To be-
beholden to
yeah.
in a way where I sort of like owe it,
check in.
you know, to them or something like that. And
Accountable. You have to be accountable.
yeah, people to be accountable, all of that. And that's one of the great myths of, you know, this whole addiction construct, is that you need to be around a group. We see it all the time.
Oh, yeah.
People are like, all right, what are the other groups I can go to? I hate AA. And
Oh.
well, okay, if you hate AA, they invented, I mean, the temperance movement kind
Well,
of
yeah, but
invented.
they popularized
They
it.
popularized that people who are gonna quit drinking or something need to gather in groups,
Right, they need to
And
be
for-
propped up by
for-
others.
you know, and that's AA's invention. So you don't need a non-12-step group. You want one, go ahead. But there's this feeling that you need something like that, and you don't, you know. And the thing I think about is you were just talking about time. The biggest drain of a substance use problem is your time. It's the opportunity
Yeah.
cost. I'm
Oh,
running around chasing this drug all day, and I want to be living my life.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, and so the biggest reason you quit is to move on to
It's
better
to have
things.
a life. Exactly.
And so move on to those things. And for anybody who's watching that likes AA and stays in it, fine. Where, you know what I mean?
if that's want to be the way you want to be spending your time.
But yeah, if that's what you like, you truly love those people. But and that's great. We applaud it. But if you don't like it there, you don't need another support group.
That's huge, because you really can be free. And I think that needs to be said over and over. And it doesn't sink into people. I've had people in class with me for 2 weeks, and then they go, I can really just move on. I'm like, yes,
Yeah.
I've been saying that for 14 days straight. You know, you really can. And it's a foreign concept to people that have been in treatment for, maybe years or months or whatever. So, yeah, you can move on.
Yeah.
We got a comment that says, well, moderation seems to be the key. I do not have to consider myself sick or disabled. That's absolutely true. And we address moderation quite a bit.
Yeah.
I want to go back to something that these guys said about support groups. We're not knocking support groups. We're just saying just like a lot of people misunderstand our stance on MAT, medication assisted treatment. They misunderstand our stance on support groups. We're not saying don't do them.
Right.
We're not saying do them. We're just giving you the information that
You don't have
you
to.
don't have to. You don't, not everybody right now, people are being put on Suboxone for alcohol withdrawal and benzodiazepine
Yeah,
withdrawal.
it's crazy.
It's
doesn't even make
dangerous.
sense,
It's
yeah.
dangerous. It's
So that's another thing we try to just set the record straight on. But if like the only issue in your life is you feel like there's withdrawal and you can't make it over that hump, and you've tried and you detox and you want to do Suboxone and you're like,
Right.
oh, shit, this works. Great. When we criticize it, we're not saying don't do that.
exactly.
But we do really hate the view that you have to do these things.
Exactly.
or
That
that-
you're being forced. That you need them. You need them because the data doesn't support that. It just doesn't support that.
Yeah.
So that's all. That's our primary purpose, is to let people know if this isn't something that you want, there are more effective ways to change. And the other part of leaving, the other thing about a support group is, I was telling somebody who I've been working with, and she was talking about possibly doing MAT for a little while, and getting into some therapy, and she's like, but you don't like that. And I went, what are you talking about? I've never said anything like that. There is such a thing. When we say you don't need support, you don't need it. But if you think that you can benefit from it for a period of time while you figure out what you want, well, that's kind of what it's like when you come to the retreat. I mean, that's even after you leave, if you think you can benefit from SMART meetings for a period of time when you're home, then try it. But just know that you don't need it, and really be honest with yourself about what it's doing for you, what it's not doing for you. And I don't know how.
Well, don't fall prey to the tyranny of experts.
Yes.
Right? I
Yes.
mean, there's this idea, and it's,
that you don't know what you need.
Yeah, that it's centered around the word need. If an expert says to you that you won't get over your heroin problem unless you do this, and you need it for the rest of your life because relapse is inevitable, that's a lie. That's simply
It's
not
totally not true.
Yeah, it's simply false.
It literally is not supported by any data at all.
But here's the difficulty. It becomes true when you believe it.
Yeah.
And that's the sadness
Yeah.
about what's happening to people, is you come in ignorant. You're not stupid. You're ignorant.
You just
of
don't
the-
have the information.
Yeah, you've been taught since you were born in this culture that drugs have powers that they don't possess. And so you come at this in a very vulnerable spot where you believe, I can't stop this behavior. So when you start with that premise, and then an expert comes along and says, well, you're one of those that needs, Suboxone, because you won't stay sober ever without it. So it's and then they use terms like better is better.
Yeah.
It's better to be on
Right.
Suboxone than to be dead. Well, why is that conditional narrative created at all? Why doesn't somebody come along and say, did you know that 96% of heroin users stop whether treated or not? Why isn't that the very first thing that's said to somebody?
Right. Isn't that great news?
That's amazing. It's amazing. Here's a guy.
You mean I can
Yeah.
stop?
Yeah, and I don't chalk up my success to treatment. I
Right.
chalk up getting worse to treatment, actually, because
Yeah.
I was
Me too.
misled, and it just dashes your hopes to be like, well, you shouldn't have tried heroin. It's the best feeling on earth, and now, but you can't do it, because you're gonna lose control, and so you're just gonna have to suck it up and learn how to cope with it, you know, that you're not
Yeah.
doing it. And you look at that and you go, screw it, I'm just going to go shoot up heroin.
Exactly.
Like, that's,
It's like,
that's what
I
it
have
is.
no hope.
yeah, if it's going to be this for the rest of my life. So I credit treatment with making things worse for me. And I credit and I used to credit Mark and Michelle and Clayton and Dan, all the great people that helped me, and Jerry. And you know, Jerry said, don't, you know, he's like, I didn't do anything. Yeah.
Right.
It's like, thank you for helping me. I didn't do anything.
Yeah.
You did it, you know, and so, you know, I credit myself with that. Why did I go down this path? But yeah, so people telling you that you can't get over this is the issue. And maybe that's why there's two reasons people feel stuck in support groups. One, and feel sad and scared about leaving them. One is that you believe the lie that you need to be there, that you'll fall apart without it. The other is you just don't know what to do and what to move on to
Right.
next. And that's not very different than graduating high school,
Well, that's a
or
great.
Yes.
college,
That's
or the kids
Or
leave,
retiring.
you retire.
The kids leaving,
The
the
kids
empty nest.
leave.
That's
Yeah.
a huge transition.
There's
Yeah, it
these
is.
transition points in life where you don't know what to do, and those are not easy for anybody.
Right.
And they, like we just mentioned, they come later at life too, right? And
Yeah.
so this is one of those times, if you've realized, you know, you don't like what's going on with you in AA, and you know, and you don't want to live that way, but you're afraid to leave it. This is just one of those times, and it takes, you know, making a choice to get up and move in a new direction. And for me, well, I didn't do the leave AA thing, but I just, for me, there was a point where it's like, all right, I'm going to go to college. I'm going to start learning acting and be in the theater, and
Which
I'm
you did, which was
gonna-
cool.
and I'm
Yeah,
going to
let's
get
go.
these couple of odd jobs, and, you know, and just try things. I started to try to write my book. There was a time where I was like exploring, like, what do I want to be and
Yes.
do?
We all did that.
We
And
did.
this, you know, leaving something that you felt beholden to going to every day
Yeah.
and being involved with people through this construct every day is one of those moments where, you know, you look at what else life has to offer. Maybe sometimes that's just time.
Yeah.
Maybe it is just like, well, I already have a bunch of things I want to do, and I've been thinking I need to be here. If that's you, it's probably very easy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
if you already know, you already are strapped for time, and you know where you need it and want to devote it, then that's like you're going to move on
Well,
easily.
it was funny because in my path of leaving AA, I can remember Jerry saying to me, "Mark, you don't need to go to meetings," and this is way early. And he said, and there's all this pressure from the AA groups that, you know, you're a young person, you're going to be an addict for the rest of your life. You need to be here and be here for the next generation of young people. And I remember Jerry sitting me down and he goes, "What would you like to do?" I said, "You know what? I used to be a heavy smoker and drinker, obviously, and I want to be a model of health. That was something that was really, really important to me." And he goes, "Do you want to start running?" I said, "I do. I want to." And then I started running. I started running in races, and I started getting medals. And, you know, it was an exciting time for me, and I felt incredible. And then I said, "You know what? I used to box. I really want to actually box, you know?" And so I did that. And then I got a drum set. I started all these things that I used to dream about drunk. I started doing. I never did any of them drunk. I would talk about it, I would dream about it, and then I'd be drunk on the floor somewhere, right? For years. And so I literally made a list of all the things that I dreamed about, and I did them all. I went back to college. I said, I'm going to prove that I'm smart, because I never was good academically. And I graduated second in my class, you know? And so it was such an exciting time. And that really hasn't changed. Now, Steve brought up something that I think is really crucial. This change, this mental gaze going from 12-step to out of 12-step, when you shift your gaze, is a huge transition, because the 12 steps is devoted to the past.
Yes.
So you're really incredibly held back.
You're anchored.
You're anchored. You're confined to this really negative self-image that you might have of yourself. So when you switch that mental gaze, it's almost like you're turning your head to this unknown that Matthew describes.
Yeah.
It's scary for some people, but it's exciting too.
Yes.
Let go of the past. It's really okay to let go of the past, no matter how traumatic. My past was wicked traumatic. It was not good. And I let it go. And I moved on. And I didn't need counselors to tell me how to do that. I was able to simply switch my gaze and move on.
Well, ultimately, you get to choose the way you view your future. You either view your future as
That's a good
something
point.
exciting, or you can view your future as something that's very scary
And daunting.
and daunting. And it depends on what you invest in, like what thoughts you invest in. And because of course it's scary I think it's scary for everybody transitioning, to like if you leave a marriage, or when your kids leave, or you leave a job that you've been at a long time, that's a scary thing. And the people that are most successful, the people that view it as, well, this will be an exciting adventure.
Right.
Let's see what happens.
This is my opportunity to switch my gaze.
Exactly.
We got a good question here. Robert asks, what are your thoughts on connection is the opposite of addiction? And so I want to use that one because I have something in the can on this.
He
right?
does. He does. Good question. Thank you.
So connection is the opposite of addiction. That comes from Johann. Right, Johann Hari, who wrote Chasing the Scream. And then he's sort of taking that inspiration from Bruce Alexander, who did the Rat Park studies. It's very like, it's a problem of community and we don't treat people well, and they're disconnected, they're not socially connected, right? And if only, so we could maybe love them into getting over their addiction.
Right.
And there's some pretty also deep theories where people talk about theories of bonding. What's his name? Peter Cohen, who wrote The Naked Empress, about the disease model. He breaks down the disease model, and then he says, but this is really bonding. It's like the way that a baby bonds to the mother, that sort of, and that's kind of the whole idea behind that, is that, well, people are just sad and alone, and that's why they use. And if they weren't sad and alone, they would stop. I mean, all I got to say is you've got to look around you, and you'll see plenty of people with drug and alcohol problems who have tons of friends, and
close-knit families, wonderful families.
All of it. There's tons of that. I have a friend that died last year of, he was maybe GHB and meth, and it was really sad. He had tons of great friends,
and then the opposite is true.
Who loved him and were, and wanted to spend all the time with him and everything, and he wanted to be, and he was moving from that towards just drugs all the time, and it was a really sad case. So I think, what were we going to jump in with there?
The opposite is true, that there are many people who are disconnected and live as hermits that don't get high.
Yeah.
Well,
I know
and there are people that go into, like, they go to rehab or into recovery, or they just quit. Maybe they have a heavy substance use problem. They just quit, and they're not social afterwards.
Sure.
Yeah.
They just keep to themselves. And I know a ton of people that choose that.
So now I'm going to say there may be, there's I can imagine cases like a homeless person who has been cut off from their family, right? They've just become so estranged or whatever, and maybe bringing that person into the fold is something that allows for the beginning of some change. And certainly if you're a person who feels like you need more of a social life, go after it. But I don't think it's the opposite of addiction. Addiction is to the degree that let's talk about how we understand it. When we see somebody, we're like, wow, that person is fixated on this one thing.
Yes.
It
becomes everything to them.
It becomes everything to them, right? Like, they think they need it at all these times. So, what I propose as a counterpoint to this is diversification is the opposite of addiction. It's being not fixated on one thing. It's knowing you have other options. And, you can be fixated. You could think, this is what I need for excitement in my life. And so all you're doing is going on these crazy Coke binges every weekend. And we can, you consider yourself to have an addiction. And it's like, well, what is really the problem there? It's like, well, you think that's the only way to have fun.
Well, that's it. When
And
you
excitement. So
Yeah.
you need to broaden your scope, right? And so that's what I would say is the opposite of addiction.
That's right. And the first step to creating diversification is possibility, keeping your mind open to the possibility that you could be happier doing other things. I talk to people all the time when they're stay here at the retreat in the beginning, and I say, tell me all the benefits of getting high and drunk, and they can list off pages.
Oh yeah.
Pages. And then I
I
say,
just had a class like that today.
yeah, and then I tell them to write all the possibilities in their life, and they come up with 2 things. You know?
Right.
I mean,
Outside.
outside of the addiction realm, and they're stumped. They're stumped. And here's what's funny: by the end of the course, those things switch.
Yes.
The lists switch, and because we talk about it consistently throughout, that there is other things that could possibly make you happy, and we're constantly thinking about it, and that's shifting the mental gaze, diversifying your likes and dislikes, right?
Yes.
And opening the possibility that your life could be better doing other things. I was 19 years old, and I had never experienced a whole hell of a lot in my life because my life had just begun when I got sober. And I remember thinking at first, when I stepped out of my hometown and I was homeless and all that was going on, there was this big wide world out there, and I just didn't know what to do. And then I said to myself, well, I just got to start doing things, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's how it started. There was no easy way to make it happen. But here's what's interesting, and I want to end with this on this point. When I started moving in a new direction, it did get easier quickly because things were exciting.
Yeah.
And I liked them. And I said, holy cow, I didn't know that I could like other things than getting fucked up.
Yeah.
Right.
I just didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't have the knowledge of that. So go out and live your life.
Yeah. And if that means connecting with more people, do it.
Exactly
But that
right.
doesn't necessarily, I don't
That's
take
not
that
a
as
blanket solution.
as a blanket solution.
Connection can be part of the diversification.
It was for
Yeah.
me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And for me
Yeah.
too.
It was for me. I enjoyed having new friends and being a part of a large group. And I've always craved that because I'm a social creature. But I've met hundreds of guys, women that don't want that.
Yeah, they don't. They like, they're happy keeping to themselves and
do
not
other
having
things.
a vast social life. I don't have a huge social life. I did other things when I left AA. I
Raised the family.
I raised a family. I volunteered at I became a firefighter, and which was something I wanted to do. It was very cool. So I met people at all of these different things, but ultimately somebody that has 1 or 2 very close friends, and I don't need a big social group.
But it is funny because I know Michelle so well. We're like brother and sister, and we'll be going through town, and she has a very tight-knit group of people that she trusts and is a part of in her life. But she knows everybody.
Yeah, I do.
And she knows everybody because she was involved in civic things.
I was.
You know?
I was a village clerk and treasurer. My husband coached baseball, little league. I was involved with my kids at their schools, and so I did get involved in a lot of different things. But I wouldn't really say that was making connections with
Right.
people.
You didn't. You didn't.
No.
You had a very tight-knit group of people
Yeah.
that you connect with.
But I'm friendly to everybody.
Yeah.
Can I jump to one of the things you brought up before?
Yeah.
About therapy, and somebody saying, "Oh, well, I know you don't really approve of therapy."
Right.
So I've gotten that as well. And so now this isn't a question per se, but it's a reaction. And I got it on my page like a week ago. Like, I don't know why you reject psychology. And and it's like,
Where does that come from?
we built this book on psychology.
Like the whole thing.
Like, that's
It's-
where my
it's-
undergraduate
Yeah,
degree is, so I
it's-
definitely don't reject it.
there's quotations from all sorts of psychologists. We're translating their work, and boiling it down for you, right? And there's all sorts of citations to it, but the context that it came up in, I think, now I forget, but generally, I'll speak out a lot about the idea that that addiction is caused by
Right. Mental
trauma,
health.
stress, what have you, right? These other mental health problems, right? Now, that's one school of psychology, is to say, well, these things directly cause this, and you're just a little pawn of your emotions. You know what I mean?
Right, right. You
That's
have no
one school
control.
of psychology, is to think of things that way, right? And we're a little bit more with these folks that say, like, look, you have control over how you think and your beliefs, your attributional style, like the way you explain to yourself what you do, why you do it, the way you are, etc. That's been shown in all kinds of psychological research to affect what you do.
Yes.
Right. And so we're, and we've seen all of that stuff come true in our own lives, and we've seen it come true for other people, and we've seen there's a massive body of research. So I don't reject psychology.
Not
we
at
don't
all.
reject psychology. But I
have
can't deny, but
books,
like
tons
on
of books.
saying, but, and I had it come up in class recently the other day. Oh, I know you guys are against the psychological view. And it's like, no. And I know exactly what that was about in class too. It was about the idea that I have to get over my negative feelings to get over my drinking problem.
Right.
Right. And it's like, no, we're just saying, like, you can have problems, you can feel depressed, all of this. And if you don't relate that to drinking.
Right. If you don't feel like you're going to be helped, if you don't feel like alcohol is going to help you with those problems, then you won't choose it.
And I got all those problems right now, but I don't have an alcohol problem. Right?
Exactly. I mean, it's part of life.
Right?
Everybody goes through difficult times in life.
But so some people think psychology is touchy-feely. I'm going to make you feel better, soothe you into doing the right thing, living the right way. Okay, that's some people's view of psychology. But there's a whole world of psychological research and schools of thought
that shows that you're a proactively thinking, choosing person.
So we subscribe to that.
Right.
Now, on that issue of, is stress going to, make you use, or depression or anxiety or this or that, there was I ran into something recently, the mood freezing pill studies. There was a whole, and like they found people who eat when they're sad, right?
Yep.
And one view is sadness for these people directly causes eating, right? So they set up an experiment where they induced sadness.
Oh my God.
They induced sadness and they gave them the opportunity to eat or whatever, and then they ate. Then they ran it another time where they induced the sadness,